Really thrilled that you all are here to join us today. My name is Justin Clifford. I work at Bereave. I'm going to be your host today. This is the Lost Leaders Live podcast, where we help HR leaders really build better support systems for their people. We explore the human side of these systems and the business impact of getting it right. So each month we sit down with HR leaders and workplace experts who have lived it, right? They've seen the wins, they've seen the losses, they've learned the lessons that really come with leading people through change. And together, we really explore how empathy, leadership, and strategy kind of intersect and help people understand what they can do right now to build a healthier, higher performing organization. And the reason we do these programs is that Bereave is on a mission to really help companies provide the absolute best possible bereavement response when their employees suffer a loss. And in that pursuit, we get to meet some incredible people that are doing incredible things that can bring so much education to business leaders that are trying to build a more supportive workplace. So this is our effort to get them in front of you, right? Keeping them wouldn't be fair. So we like to do this program to help spread the word of people that are doing great work. The chat is open. We will monitor for questions as we go. So feel free to pop a question in. I'll keep an eye on it and insert it where it makes sense. If we don't answer your question today, we'll try to follow up and get to that as well. We're going to go to 45 past the hour or so, and we will get the recordings out by the end of the week. All right. You're here for Orly Cotel. Orly is a social impact leader who's spent the last 20 years running campaigns that change policy and culture. She helped launch paid leave for the U.S., which won paid leave for more than 8 million workers. Imagine that, impacting 8 million people at companies like Walmart, Starbucks, and CVS. Orly's worked with hundreds of employers to build more equitable policies, and she's helped CEOs across the country really advocate for national paid leave, also playing an integral role of the launch of the Show Us Your Leave campaign with the SKIM, which is one of the reasons she and I connected several months ago. She's the founder of Orly Cotel Consulting and president of the board at Bright Spot Network, a nonprofit that supports parents facing cancer while raising their kids. Orly, welcome to Lost Leaders.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today and talk about all this important material.
Yeah, you're doing amazing work, and I'm really excited to learn more myself, obviously, selfishly, but also kind of get this work out into the hands of people that might be able to actually impact more closely to their own workplace. Can you talk a little bit about why you've dedicated your career to paid leave?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I think that there's a short answer and a long answer, and I'll meet you somewhere in the middle there. But I think for a lot of folks, there's this kind of eureka moment, this experience that happens around becoming a parent for the first time. So in my case, when I welcomed my first baby, I was really shocked by how hard it was, how hard the recovery was, how hard the transition was to being a new parent, and really aware of how much privilege I had as someone who had paid leave. I have racial privilege. I have socioeconomic privilege. I have a partner who I'm married to who also had paid leave. We had family to help. So all of those things, and we still faced all the challenges of what does this mean? How do we integrate these new roles as parents into our lives as working people and as professionals? And I kept thinking, if this is so hard for me and I have all this privilege, what is this like for someone who's working in a minimum wage job who doesn't have any paid leave? And I think we'll get more into the landscape of how the lack of paid leave in this country really is impacting working people, since we are the only industrial nation in the world that does not have paid leave. I'll say that again, the only nation in the world other than Papua New Guinea that does not have national paid leave. But let me also share quickly, I also like to tell people, I might not be alive today without paid leave. So this is really deeply personal. I'll tell you more about that. My mother was born in 1949, and she was born 3.5 months premature. So she was born at 25 weeks of gestation. She weighed less than 2 pounds. And at that time, most babies that were born that early either didn't survive or had lifelong serious medical implications from being born so premature. And paid leave did not exist at that time. It certainly wasn't even a concept. I'm not even sure there was a vocabulary around it. There was kind of an understanding that when a tiny premature baby was in the NICU, that having their parents around helped their survival rates. And at the time, my grandmother was recovering at home in the hospital. At her home, after the hospital, she was home recovering after that birth. My grandfather was the one who was, fell on him to see if he could be by his infant daughter's side while she was struggling for his life. And because he was self-employed, he was able to take that time. He didn't have to ask his boss. My grandmother would express a tiny amount of breast milk at home, and he would put it in this little eyedropper bottle in his pocket, and he would take the streetcar down to the NICU at the hospital. This was the 1940s. Mm-hmm. And he would feed his infant daughter out of a doll bottle, a tiny bottle, tiny bits of breast milk in the hopes that she would live. Mm-hmm. And it was a total miracle. I mean, not only did she survive, but I'm not sure she ever went back into a hospital until she gave birth to me 30 years later. Mm-hmm. So wow. I share that story. I like to, it's very intense and it's very personal, but I like to start with that story because if she hadn't survived, I wouldn't be alive today. And I really, I view that as a sign not only of what paid leave can mean to any family, but what it can mean for generations, right? There's this compounding sense of you care for one person and then they can grow up and care for their own children, and it goes on and on.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. And obviously, there are a lot of reasons that you're dedicating your life to this, but also there's an incredibly personal side to this, obviously. Sure. You mentioned earlier about the paid leave landscape. You said something like the United States is the only industrialized nation in the world besides Papua New Guinea without national paid leave. Can you kind of dissect like what is going on?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why we don't have it federally. There's been a tremendous amount of work to try to pass a federal bill that would bring paid leave to everyone in the US. But essentially what that means is that, in this country, 1 in 4 new mothers is back at work within 2 weeks of giving birth. 2 weeks, and usually still bleeding, certainly not physically recovered. I mean, there's no doctor in the country who's approving someone to go back to work 2 weeks after childbirth, but if you don't have the leave, you don't have a choice. And I think it's really important to note that, I know we'll get into this more, but this is also how paid leave intersects in many ways with bereavement. When we talk about paid leave, we often think of parental leave because that's the most common use case that private sector employers are providing. But paid leave really is a much wider category. It also includes paid family caregiving leave, which means, caring for a family member when they're dealing with a very serious illness like cancer, caring for an aging parent, end-of-life care. And it can also mean personal medical leave. So the leave that someone gets to care for their own serious surgery or recovery or anything like that. So, it's not just about parents. It really touches every person in this country, every member of the workforce. Every single person will need leave at some point in their career, whether it is to care for themselves, to care for a baby, to care for a family member. It's going to touch all of us. So the fact that we don't have anything like that in the US, it has implications across our economy, across our workplaces, and across public health. It touches everything.
Yeah. What are like, and you said there are a lot of reasons for it, but if there's like an underlying, theme or trend that you can identify for like why, right? Is it because we've got different type of jobs, or is it a culture thing, or is it the inability to do what other people are doing, internationally? Like what is holding us back?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of reasons, but if I speak freely here, I would say I think paid leave has been unfairly pigeonholed as a quote unquote women's issue. And I think federally and legislatively, we don't prioritize issues that are seen as women's issues. We could have a whole separate podcast conversation about that.
A couple of them, probably.
But I think a lot of my work is working with executives and HR leaders and companies to really show, this is an economic issue, and a business issue. And the more that we can look at it that way, the more will motivate our leaders to take action. I will also say, in the United States, when you look at federal policy, half of the US Senate are senior citizens. So half of them are currently over the age of 65. They were raising their families in a completely different era when it was much more common for people to be able to afford for one parent, the woman, almost always, to stay home and be able to have that caregiving role. And whether or not, you even bring into it the choice of what people want or don't want to do, we live in an economy now where you can't afford that. People cannot afford to be stay-at-home caregivers. And so we need to open the eyes of our lawmakers to the reality of the economy in this country today, and also to what that really means for families and workers, because our entire economy is set up with this concept that there's one unpaid person at home who's doing all the caregiving. And that's just not how it works anymore.
Sure. Totally. I have felt, just especially being in tech for the past, almost decade and a half, I have seen and felt what feels like progress in my worldview, predominantly working with other tech companies. But I realize that my worldview has been very limited to one specific industry. And I think a lot about kind of what you alluded to, people that don't have the leave, that are going back after 2 weeks. I think about the families that have people working that have to clock in and clock out. They have to be physically there all the time. Just not my life. And there's all of these other things that go on in different industries. As you think about the broad scope here, are my views that there has been progress because I've seen it in tech? Is that applicable more broadly? Like, is there progress happening outside of that?
Yeah, we've seen a tectonic shift in paid family leave in the workplace. I think it's become one of what I think of as a table stakes benefit. Competitive employers have to provide it if they want to be competitive. And a lot of the work that we did when I was at the Paid Leave for the US campaign was about how do we take paid leave and take it from being, at the time, 2016, when I started this work, it was an elite benefit for people who were in the C-suite or in professional class jobs. How do we translate that into working class folks, into people in minimum wage jobs? How do we make sure that there's equity in terms of this benefit so that everyone needs it? Everyone can use it when they need it. Because, someone who is, working in a retail job, they need to be there for their family just as much as someone who's an executive, and everyone should be able to. So yes, it started in tech. I would say tech companies really led the way with the best in class benefits. And then through a lot of the work that my colleagues and I have been doing, we've helped to really push it into other sectors, including retail. And I will say this work really layers. So there's all of the leadership in the private sector, from what companies are doing, businesses are doing to provide paid leave for their employees. And also, we've worked hard to really create public sector programs around paid leave. And what that means is, because we don't have a federal national paid leave program like every other country, it's been state by state. So when I started doing this work 10 years ago, there were 8 years ago, there were around 3 states that provided paid family leave. And now there's 13 states plus the District of Columbia. And what happens in those states is that there are statewide insurance programs where employers and employees pay in a small premium. And then when it comes time for that employee to take paid leave, the state actually handles the administration and dispenses the check and pays the employee, which really makes it much more widely accessible to mid-size and small businesses that couldn't previously afford to just cover the whole cost of the leave. So those programs, they help everyone because they allow more people to be able to take leave, and they also lower the risk for the employer when they're not sure how many employees will have to be out and what kind of salary they'll have to cover at any given time. That risk is pooled and it's covered by the state program.
Wow. So kind of with the shift that you're talking about, and we can still argue about what best in class in the United States is and whether or not it's good enough, right, compared to the rest of the world. That's a whole nother topic as well. But right now, if you look at maybe the companies that are doing it the best, that are offering a strong employee benefit program, What does that look like right now? How is that structured?
Yeah, so I would say there's a number of different factors that I look at. I work directly with companies. Often I'll provide some pro bono guidance and counseling as companies want to expand their paid leave policy. And there are a few different factors that we look at together. So the first is your paid leave program inclusive? And what I mean by that is, are you providing not only maternity leave, but are you providing paternity leave? And are you doing it in a way that is, I think of it as being gender neutral and accessible. So for example, are adoptive parents included? Is surrogacy included? Are you doing it in a way that fully supports all parents to be able to be there and bond with their baby? And then the other component of what companies are doing that is kind of best in class, Deloitte pioneered this language around having your policy be not only gender neutral, but generational neutral. And what they mean by that is when they launched their program initially, they said, we're going to do 16 weeks of paid leave. You can take it for any purpose, if it's parental leave or family caregiving. So you can take this to welcome a new baby. You can take it to care for an aging parent. You can take it to care for a family member with cancer. You do you be there for your family. If you need to be there, we'll support you in that. So that is another component of, the best in class benefits around paid leave. And then there's these new emerging components of paid leave that a lot of employers are beginning to explore and offer for other aspects of paid leave. So that can be things like miscarriage leave. It can be NICU leave is a new emerging category, which is leave to be there for extra time if your baby's in the neonatal intensive care unit. The state of Colorado just became the first state to pass a program where the state insurance fund for paid leave will pay for extra time, up to 12 extra weeks for a family with a baby in the neonatal intensive care unit, which has been a pioneering program. It just kicked off in January 1st. So we'll start to see the benefits of that, but truly a game changer, for people who want to be by their baby's side. And bereavement leave obviously plays into this as well. I mean, I would say it's not part of the state insurance programs for paid leave, but when you think about leave for your employees, what you really want to think about is, how do we support them in all the stages of their life? Because caregiving can't really be separated from work. If you talk about supporting your people, the most important thing to realize is they're people. So they're going to come up, things are going to come up in their lives, whether it's a birth, a death, an illness. And it doesn't serve anyone to have someone sitting at their desk at work crying. We want to be able to make sure people are able to get the emotional support and care and time that they need, so that when they show up at work, they can be their best selves, do their best work.
Yeah, can we talk about that for a second? Because I think about all of the things that you've said, and I think about the people that are behind it, right? You're talking about, like, we're dealing with people, talking about people. What is at stake in terms of impact for somebody who doesn't have the access, has to do all of those things, from physical healing to emotional navigation to caring for others and work? What is kind of the downstream effect, not only to that person, but also to the company?
Well, first, let's talk a little bit about some examples of what it means to really have no paid leave. And then I can share a little bit more about how this might show up in the workplaces of some of the folks that are listening in on this. When we talk about having no paid leave, I mean, I really think about a person I had a conversation with, a dad in New Hampshire a number of years ago. He was a security guard, and he was on his way to work when his wife went into labor. So he called his boss and he said, "I'm sorry, but I can't come in today. I'm getting in the car now to drive my wife to the hospital. She's having our baby." And his boss said, "Well, you don't have the day off today, so you choose. You can go with your wife, but you're fired if you do. Otherwise, show up here. You're late for work." And in that moment, he had to make that choice. I mean, can you imagine having to make that choice? So he chose his wife. And that meant he lost his job. And so just at the moment in his life when he was having increased expenses, welcoming a new baby, hospital bills, paying for diapers, all of those things, he was unemployed. And that's what we're doing to families in this country today when we don't provide paid family leave.
Mhm.
And this may feel a little out of scope for some of the people leaders who are on this call, because if you're on this call, it means you're thinking about this and you probably provide some form of leave for your employees and you want to be there for them. But you still have probably contractors who are security guards who work for your company and they're not covered. They're not getting paid leave, right? So when we pass public policy around paid leave, what we do is we increase the benefits for the entire ecosystem so that everyone who's helping to support your company, working with your company, contracting with your company, that they also have access to some of the great benefits that your employees have, because that rising tide lifts all boats and it really helps everyone thrive better in the workplace. But I do think, Justin, to answer your question about, what does this mean for the folks who are on this call? All of the data shows that when you increase paid leave access for your employees, when you really show up for your people to help them live their best lives, it improves your retention, it improves your recruitment, and it really improves workplace morale. So, I can talk a little bit about my own experience. There have been a number of times in my life where I've needed paid leave separate from parental leave. At really critical crisis inflection points in my life, where if I hadn't had paid leave, I know for sure I would have quit that job and never come back. But because my employer cared for me, they got many, many more years of my loyalty, my best work, championing that workplace, growing their programs, producing results,
Sure.
All of that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because you talked earlier about like some of the innovative programs, including NICU and others, miscarriage, specifically calling out very specific things in people's lives. We've started to see a rise of what people have referred to as like empathy leave or compassionate leave that basically take all of life's things, right? And try to name a bunch of them and basically say it's not limited to these, but here are some examples. But you have 30 days on any given rolling 365-day basis for when life goes sideways. We can't cover it all, but we want to cover it all, right? It's like can't name it all, but we can cover it all. What do you? And these are company specific. It's called out as protected. It's called out as paid. How do you think about like those? Are those more helpful or less helpful or somewhere in between than naming every specific reason that somebody might leave and putting a policy around it?
I think those programs are fantastic when they're in addition to a well-crafted paid family and medical leave benefit, because I do think that 30 days is not enough if you're welcoming a new baby or if you're treating your cancer, right?
Yeah.
So I always encourage employers to have a very well-crafted paid family and medical leave policy. And if anyone here is looking to improve or increase your policy, please ping me. My DMs are always open on LinkedIn, and I'm sure Justin can share my contact info too. I'm happy to work pro bono with employers to share some of the guidance that I already have and documents I have and policy language. But I will say that those extra kind of 30-day compassionate leave programs are so fantastic because there are use cases that come up that really aren't included in paid family and medical leave. And also, it's very challenging sometimes for employees to have to talk with their managers about the specific reason for their leave. So for example, for someone experiencing a miscarriage, that's deeply personal. They may not want to talk with their boss, their supervisor about that experience. It may be too painful or too personal. And so saying I need to take compassionate leave, no questions asked, really enables people to take the leave that they need. And I have heard nightmare stories about people who show up at work in the office having a miscarriage. They are miscarrying at work, bleeding in their office chair because they don't have the leave or they don't want to talk about it. And you don't want that as an employer. I mean, let alone the liability that you're carrying as an employer in that situation. So allowing people to have that is really, really helpful. And I'll also say the 30 days thing, I think we should talk a bit about some of the trends that we're seeing with bereavement leave in particular, because I'm seeing an increased trend around more employers providing bereavement leave, which is great. And many of the leaves that are being provided are 3 days, 5 days. certainly better than nothing, but far below what people need, and not helping you to meet your goal as an employer. Because if your goal as an employer is, I want to recruit the best people, retain the best people, and keep their morale high enough to do excellent work for our organization. If someone loses someone they love, they're not ready to be back at their desk 3 days later. And I just want to take a moment. Everyone on this call who's an HR leader is also a family member, right? So take a moment and just think about the person in your life who you love with your whole heart, whether it's your child, your parent, your sibling, your partner, your best friend, someone you just love. And imagine that you got a call out of the blue that that person was in a car accident and was gone. Would you be ready to be at your desk 3 days later doing your best work? There's no chance. I mean, I've been through this personally with that surprise phone call, and I was out for 3 weeks and back at my desk 3 weeks later, and that was not enough time. And, but if it had been 3 days, I would have quit my job, right? Because at that point, your heart is broken. You're trying to rebuild your life, let alone deal with the logistics of the arrangements for, funeral and the avalanche of paperwork that people have to tackle when a loved one dies. So there's all these different pieces that we have to think about, where if we bring it back to our goals, if what we're trying to do is not have a policy. The policy is not the goal. The policy is the path to get to the goal. What we're trying to do is have our workplaces thrive, produce results with a team that's happy and thriving and working with great morale. And so the way you do that is by showing up for your people when they really need it the most.
Yeah. No, I love it. Thank you. And I've got this burning question. There's a question in the chat, Emily's question, that I want to get to. I want to ask your opinion, because we have our opinion about why bereavement lags in the way it does. You go to a careers page or a culture page, and they talk about the support of family and want to support the whole employee and all of this language around whole. But in actuality, there's actually a hole or a gap in the way they do this, because they don't promote their bereavement policy or their bereavement support. Why do you think bereavement is the thing that gets pushed aside to a policy, usually a dedicated amount of time associated to a dedicated type of relationship in that 3 to 5 day window, and that's what is anticipated to be helpful? Why is bereavement kind of the getting the short end of the stick there?
Well, our culture pushes bereavement leave to the side because our culture doesn't talk about death. We don't even say the words dead. We say passed away. Right? We're so uncomfortable talking about death that we prefer to pretend it doesn't exist. And it's doing our workplaces a disservice, because every single working person is a person with people they love. And at some point, someone they love will die. We will all die. Our loved ones will die. This is part of life, and we never talk about it. I mean, it's hard to even say that in a podcast discussion, right? And so I think we push this to the side because we're not comfortable with it, but our discomfort with this important topic is really damaging our workplaces, because we are ignoring a reality that's going to impact every single person who we work with throughout our entire working lives. So yeah, I think we need to really more deeply consider, how do we tackle bereavement leave? How do we support our employees with bereavement, and provide not just the time off they need, but the emotional support for their on-ramping again after. So all of these things are connected. And I will say, I really think of paid leave as an ecosystem. And we can't tackle any one piece of it by itself. We have to think of the whole employee. And so, for example, one of the things that comes up a lot is that a lot of workplace policies have these very narrow definitions of who counts for a loved one. Oh, you get 3 days off if your parent dies. You'll get 5 days off if your spouse dies. You get 0 days off if your best friend dies. You get 0 days off if your aunt or uncle dies. These policies, first of all, they're fundamentally disrespectful to our employees because they seem to say it's the employer's job to decide who you love and who matters in your life, right? And they don't give the employee the agency around being the full human that we expect them to be at work, to say at work, you can be in charge of all this stuff, but in your personal life, we don't trust you to decide who's important to you, right? So there's this trend that's happening in the public policy sector around paid family leave, which I think is very important for employers to be aware of, where it used to be that these public policies around paid leave would say, here's who counts as family. For example, FMLA has this very, very narrow definition of who counts as family, a parent, a spouse, a child. Some of the state programs have expanded that to say, we're going to count siblings, we're going to count other grandparents or in-laws, like close family members. But the best policies are these new ones that are emerging that say, we're going to count what we call chosen family, the people in your life who you have caregiving responsibilities for, who count to you as your family. Because if you think about something like the tsunami of caregiving that is going to come from the baby boomers aging, right? There are millions of baby boomers who are now senior citizens who need care. Many of them didn't have children. So if you are a baby boomer who never had a child, who's providing your care? Your parents have already passed, your siblings may have passed. Like, it's going to be a niece or a nephew or a godchild that is responsible for you at the end of your life. And all of the employers on this call, you all have workers right now who are caring for aging aunts and uncles or aging godparents or aging cousins. And if you have a policy that's very narrowly defining who counts as their family, it's denying the reality of these very time-intensive caregiving requirements that those folks have. And similarly, they may be the one who's designated to deal with all of the funeral arrangements and all of the bereavement. So you really don't want to be in the business of the employer of telling people who their family is, right? You want to be able to just say, we're here for you. We know you want to do your best work. We're going to show up for you. And then you come back to work and show up for us. And that's how it works.
Love it.
That was a very long-winded answer, but did that get it?
Yes, for me. And if I could understand it, I'm sure, I'm sure anybody else could understand it. So that's amazing. I do want to hit on Emily's question, and maybe even Jordan here too, if I read it. Emily's asking some popular arguments or stats used by the opposition to these policies. For example, are there any studies showing a significant loss of productivity, et cetera? Not that it matters, you lead with empathy, but just curious. So I think kind of what Emily's getting to is like the business case. Like, we get that this is a human thing, but what does it mean for the employer? Like, what's in it for them?
Yeah. So honestly, I'm not aware of any data that shows these policies as being detrimental. And I'm not saying that just because I'm an advocate. I mean, I would be curious to see those studies if they exist. All the studies that I have seen, and these are, scientific academic research studies, show that that paid leave is beneficial not only for public health but also for business. And the great news is, I often think of the states as incubators for public policy. So a state like California that's had a public paid leave program for more than 2 decades has had 20 years to study the effects on business. And all of the data has shown that employers are reporting that, these state paid leave programs are actually helping them, in part because they offset the employer's costs. But they're showing, at best, a very positive impact. And at worst, it's only reported as being neutral, like neither here nor there. But businesses are not reporting that, paid leave is harming them.
Sure.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think Emily even she mentioned it here. Said, she's like, I want to know what I'm up against. Like, if I walk into that room and say, I think we should do X, what might she get met with, right? What are leaders who are in opposition going to give
Yeah.
her and say
Yes, I
no?
get that question. Yeah, that's great. I love that, because I think what I usually respond with when I get asked that question is, I find that the leaders who are asking those kinds of questions are often looking only at the cost of the program and not the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure that you're really doing a full cost benefit analysis, just as you would with any other business program. And if folks want to DM me later, I can share a link to a calculator, which is basically just an Excel tool where you can put in literally the costs and the savings of your program, so that you can actually come up with a number that really reflects where your program lands. And most people see that it's in the positive, right? That there's more savings produced in recruitment, retention, morale, all of that, than the costs.
Sure.
But I think one of the reasons that you see opposition, if at all, to these programs is that we tend to think of work as time in seats, right? Like, how much time are you at your desk getting your work done? But we all know that that's not how work actually happens. If you're really tracking the outcomes and not just the time in, but what are you producing? All of that shows that when people have their needs met, they're able to show up and be much more productive in the workplace. You can produce more work out of like 5 hours of a motivated, focused, dedicated employee who's up to speed and ready to run at the task than you can in 12 hours of someone who's sitting at their desk, emotionally distraught, distracted, anxious, not focused, worrying about their spouse with cancer. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you alluded to your own. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, let me share a little bit about my own experience, because I had been a paid leave advocate for years, where my primary experience with paid leave was parental leave. And then during COVID, in June of 2020, so think back, if it's not too painful, to that time, we were in lockdown. It was a very scary, uncertain time, completely isolated from other people and from our community. It was the time in COVID when many of us were washing our groceries by hand. Some really wild situation. And at that moment, my husband was diagnosed with kidney cancer. So he got a cancer diagnosis. We were trying to work from home. We had no childcare. I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. My 2-year-old wasn't potty trained. It was a completely untenable situation. And I was able to take paid caregiving leave from work to care for him. And the state of California, by the way, paid for that time. They sent me a check with the funding to cover that time. So my employer wasn't even on the hook for it. But my employer held my job for me, let me take that time. And I was able to make sure that my husband got excellent care during that time, and that he was able to get the surgery that he needed. We were able to interview surgeons, find the right surgeon, get him the care. If I had to work through that time, I wouldn't have been producing any good work, but I also would have been really risking my husband's health and my kids' well-being. I really needed to be there for them. And the moral of the story is, he's thriving today. He just had his 5-year anniversary of being cancer-free. And, in part, but I feel like that was because we were really able to get him the care he needed, and I could focus on it. And by the way, when I went back to work, I was ready. I was thrilled to be back. I was so devoted to that employer for giving me the time that I needed. I stayed with them for many, many years after. And, I think I brought them some pretty great results. So, that all is to say, like, showing up for your people is helping them show up for you.
Yeah. Totally. Love it. Thank you. Hey, Jordan, I want to get to your question. I will do that asynchronously with you. I can give you some examples of some bereavement policies that might be helpful to you, including a template for some of the empathy and compassion leave policy that we have. Thank you for that question. I'll do it off of this as we're running out of time here. Orly, you've got people who Emily's even mentioned, like, hey, I'm going to prep this. Right. I want to need to know what I'm up against for people who want to go and make the case, right? A lot of us, tend to think like, hey, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this. And then we sit down to do it. And it feels like it's got a pretty big mountain to climb. Like, how do you document it? Where do you pull the stats? How do you make the case? How can people get started, right? If they've never done something like this and they've got the passion to go get it done, logistically, how can they get started to go down this path?
Yeah. Well, first of all, reach out to me if you want. As I said, my DMs are open. I can provide you with a whole bunch of resources, templates, benchmarking materials. There's a nonprofit called Moms First that also has great resources on their website that I helped to design, that provides everything from template language to how to do benchmarking, that cost benefit calculator, all of that good stuff. And I also highly recommend, there's a company called Sparrow that issues a report every year where they have benchmarking data that will show all of the, like, basically what is considered table stakes in your company size. They separate it out by companies that are small, mid-size, and large employers, so you can see how many weeks of paid leave people are providing in each of the different categories. How many weeks of maternity leave, paternity leave, how many weeks of caregiving leave, all of that great stuff. So definitely, there's a lot of resources out there, and I'm happy to help support. But I will say, this is a benefit that pays dividends. So I think when you make the case, you want to make sure that you're making the business case around the recruitment benefits of being competitive with your peers, and the retention and morale boosting benefits of really being able to provide for your people in the best way possible.
Love it. And thank you. I just put the 2024 Sparrow report in. That's the only one that popped up for me right away. But thank you for the offer, especially. That's incredibly kind. Speaking of incredibly kind, Orly, thank you for your generosity here. Thank you much for your time, your insight, your passion, your expertise, and really helping guide employers and the nation, which sounds pretty cool. The way you do, it truly commendable work and very inspiring. Orly, I know you mentioned I stuck your LinkedIn in the chat that I'll do again here, but is there any other place that you want to mention where people can find you?
LinkedIn is a great way, and then we can follow up over email. But I will also just add one more quick thing, which is that, as I said, there's 14 states that have these public policies for paid leave that offset your costs. So if you operate anywhere on the West Coast, all those states have paid leave, and most of the Northeast has paid leave. If you improve your policy, a lot of that cost is going to be paid for by your state and not by you. So make sure you look into that when you're modeling out your costs. And some good news, we're seeing progress in a lot of other states that are now considering passing paid leave. So the ones that I'm looking at that might be up next are Virginia, Pennsylvania. There's a bunch of others in the mix. So if you're interested in helping as a business or an employer to help pass those programs in your state to offset your costs and make it easier for you to invest in your employees, reach out to me, because I'd be happy to connect you. And there's lots of opportunities to help show business support for great public policy.
Heck yeah, that's progress. Love to hear it. For everybody, we'll follow up with the recording at least later this week. We'll probably have a summary. We put the audio recordings on Spotify as well. The videos on our website if you want to end up going there. Also, big launch coming from Bereaved tomorrow. I'm going to tease that a little bit. Something that's going to change the landscape for the way we experience death. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We're going to be pretty loud tomorrow, louder than normal, surprisingly. But really excited about that. We'll also be announcing our February guests in the coming weeks and getting invites out. Can't wait to see you next time. Until then, be well. Thanks.